And welcome back to a Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono, and my co-host, as always, Chris. Welcome back. We're in episode 14. This episode is a Fantasy Roundtable where we've got a couple special guests today with us, and we are going to go over some topics that have been racking around our brains and want to get each other's thoughts on it, and maybe give a little bit of insight to you guys in your upcoming fantasy seasons. So let's.
Some would say that it's a round table.
It is a round table. Some would say. Let's kick it off. All right, and the fantasy roundtable has begun. As I said, I'm your host, Jono. This is my co-host, Chris. With us again, two guests that are repeat offenders of the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. We have Nick down below, who joined us for the mock draft. And we have Chris Kane with us, who is here for the live NFL draft reactions. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us today. I know we've been going back and forth throughout this offseason on a bunch of categories, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to sit down and just bring our knowledge, our football knowledge, and our opinions all together on one table and just air out the dirty laundry and see what we think.
I'd say it's opinions more than knowledge. I mean, just everyone just shooting the proverbial crap, and
well, if anybody can't tell, he's got a trophy behind him that he holds very dearly. He sleeps and cries with it at nighttime. He is not going to want to let that go. And if you can't tell by the sound of his voice in the comments, he is a stubborn bastard, and he wants everybody in the league to know that he is the champ. And it pisses all the other three of us off.
Reigning champ.
So, anyway,
but that's okay. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna talk about hot topics that we all have kind of thought this off season, and bring some different things and shed some light on these topics that maybe you guys haven't heard of. So it might provide some insight for a lot of your upcoming drafts and maybe some of your outlooks on players and teams this season.
Yeah, I think we got some topics that are pretty good, stuff that you all are probably thinking yourselves too as well. And I'll kick it off here because this one is one every year. This is a topic that I talk about with everybody in the league, all my buddies, and my mock drafts. It just is like a cycle, same thing, and that's who's your fantasy crush, who's your fantasy man crush? Because every year there's somebody in my mock drafts and my fantasy draft that I can't seem to get away from grabbing, whether it be at his value or a little bit before, because I just want this person on my team. And it's hurt me in the past. For example, Mike Davis, when he went to Atlanta, was my fantasy crush. I wanted him so bad. I thought that guy was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And he just drove my team into the dirt because he was my RB2 for the season. But this year, I find myself over and over and over again in fantasy drafts going for Christian Kirk, because of where he is, how good he was last year, how good I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be this year. But I wanted him last year. I missed him. I didn't take the opportunity to jump around early, and it got to my keeper rounds, and I bypassed 2 rounds, couldn't get him. He was gone. I don't want to miss him this year, and I just get giddy thinking about it now here too, because every time it comes up, I'm grabbing him. Who has somebody out there that is that way with you? And have you had players like that in the past?
I mean, I think for me, I'm lucky enough to have him as a keeper, but it's Ramondre Stevenson. I drafted him his rookie year. I drafted him last year. I want him again this year. Like if I wasn't the first round pick and didn't have him if I wasn't the first overall pick and didn't have him as a keeper, this is a guy I would target middle of the first round. Like I want him on my team. I absolutely love him, especially this year now that there's not Damian Harris there, and he's going to carry a brunt of that workload. And now with the new offensive coordinator, I love him even more. So this is the guy I continuously want on my team. I think George Kittle's another one for me. Like I love players like that.
He's been your man since he was a rook. You drafted him and you kept him for years. He's a dog. How about you, Kane? You got anybody?
I mean, personally, I think it's still a little too early for me to be falling in love with guys right now. plus we're still up in the air with where we're going to be drafting and stuff like that. Like there are guys that I love, but like I would never be able to get my hands on with where I am right now. Like, Eckler's
Well, yeah,
a guy
but
I
I
would
mean,
love to have on my team
outside
this year.
outside first round, obviously, because first round's first round. I mean, unless you're in the top, unless you're the number one pick, it is not set in stone who you can get. Like you have no choice of who you're going to get. Now, after that, though, I mean, you're an Eagles guy, you're a Philly guy. There's not a Philly guy that you're looking to want to have on your team, regardless of keeper status in our league, in any league that you want.
Not really, because I'm up in the air with having Rodgers and maybe keeping him. So Hurts is iffy for me, and I'll talk about it later with one of the ones that I want to bring up. But that AJ Brown, Devonta Smith thing is really dicey. I've found, and I tend to not like to go those kinds of ways. And then that backfield is still shaking out.
Yeah,
I
murky.
hear reports all the time that they love Swift because Swift is everything that Miles Sanders wasn't in the receiving game, and that he could end up, being the guy. But, who's to really say? I mean, I'm really liking Olave, and he's a keeper for me. I mean, that's a guy that this year I think has an opportunity to absolutely blow up with Derrick Carr.
Well, I would say I agree with you on the AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, but I think I don't think it's a volatile situation. I honestly think it's closer to a situation like Miami, where you got two guys that they're almost guaranteed over 1,000 yards, both of them this season. And if there's any improvement from Hurts, as long as he doesn't take a step back, it's at least 1,000 yards, if not better. I mean, they don't have anybody as a wide receiver 3. They're going that two-person route there in their running game. But, Nick, you got a fantasy crush out there? I know every year you got somebody.
I've got a couple. So where I'm looking to be drafting right now is at the end of the first. And so on my swing pick in the second round, these are two guys that I think I'm going to need to pull the trigger on if I really want them on my team, because they're not going to come back to me. And that's Travis Etienne and Breece Hall. Right now, they're looking like the 12th and 13th running backs off the board, where the ADP is at this summer, about the 29th to 30th picks overall. And I think both guys are set up to be absolute studs this year. Right after that elite group of guys, like the top, I know you guys just did your top 5 running backs. So like right after that top 5 is where I'm looking to target these guys. And it's really tough to say, because the Jets obviously are one of the darlings of the offseason and early Super Bowl contenders, at least like looking to make a playoff push. So it's tough to not want to be in on the Jets, but I think Travis Etienne is set up for all the success in the world. He doesn't have James Robinson there this year. So it's a toss-up between the two. But I'd be happy with either one of them if you're picking in the end of the first round and you have another pick coming back to you in the early second, I'd be happy with either one of them.
Let's say both of them are there for you. Who do you like? Like, who do you take?
I think I have to go Breece Hall, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that one too.
Offline, like if he's healthy, which he sounds like he is, I think that the leashes, all the reins are going to be off of him, and he's going to be something special by the end of this year. But I think the same for Travis Etienne, honestly. I think Travis Etienne is a rare talent, and he showed a lot of explosiveness. He obviously played with Lawrence and has a rapport with him that dates back to college. So I think those are like of the second-year guys, right? They're both second-year guys. I think those are the two guys that I'm like really excited about after that top 5 running backs fall off the board.
Yeah,
I'll disagree with all three of you. I'd rather take Etienne.
Well, I'm gonna say I like Hall. I would take Etienne myself. I like Hall, but I'd take.
Awesome. I'd be happy with either.
Let's say Dalvin Cook doesn't go to the Jets, right? So that's the big caveat here is if Dalvin goes to the Jets, then Breece Hall is going to take a big hit. I want to hear your argument, because I think this is an interesting topic. Is why do you value Etienne over Breece Hall with the addition of Tank Bigsby, and they brought in Deontay Foreman?
Well, I would, because I think the formation
Deontay
of the
Foreman,
team
I'm pretty
around
sure
the
is in Chicago.
Let me check.
Deontay Foreman.
I'm sorry.
Formation of the team
they brought in Dearness
around
Johnson.
the Jaguars is more going to be
and JaMychal Hasty.
Etienne. It's going to be more Etienne featured than what you're going to see with the Jets. where the Jets now with Aaron Rodgers, all these wide receivers, you could see maybe a switch in that offense where they really start airing it out, which might help Breece Hall, but he's not going to tend to be leaned on for that guy as I think ETN will in the Jacksonville offense.
I completely disagree. If you look at Nathaniel Hackett's offense and you look at the guys that have been successful when Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs, Aaron Jones had big seasons and AJ Dillon had his breakout season in his rookie year with him. I think there's really Izzy out of Abanaconda there and Michael Carter, and they're not going to take a bulk of the carries away from Breece Hall. I mean, I like ETN too. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's right there in that category. Like, I'd probably have him just outside my top 10, but Breece Hall is definitely within my top 10. I mean, probably within my top 7 off the board. If Dalvin Cook's not there, I think what we've seen from running backs out of a Nathaniel Hackett offense led by Aaron Rodgers is production out of the running back position. And Breece Hall, we saw last year, he can do it in the receiving game and he can do it in the running game. And he has explosive talent to him. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not completely off. I think that your opinion's off, but like these are two guys going within a couple ADP picks on the position, and so it's interesting to hear kind of the difference of why people value one guy over another.
So wasn't Breece Hall's comp coming out of college more towards Jonathan Taylor, but like a better Jonathan Taylor almost? I thought I heard those comparisons, and if you look at Jonathan Taylor's second year, John and I think we're just talking about this offline. He had 1,800 yards and 18 touchdowns and like 500 yards receiving. I don't know. It was something insane. It's one of the best fantasy performances in the probably last decade. But it was something phenomenal. I think he's got that kind of talent, and he showed it towards the half of last year or the beginning before he got hurt last year. He was really showing what he can do.
Listen, I don't disagree with the talent of either one of them. And here's the only thing I will say is I don't know if I agree with the note that came out about Travis Etienne's usage. I think like they talked about, giving him only like 75% share or whatever it may have been. They wanted to try and limit what he was going to get because they thought he carried the ball a little bit too much last year. Listen, when you get a talented running back, they're going to get the ball, and he's got great opportunities at the backfield. So maybe he gets some less carries, but that's so he can get more receptions. And when you have an offense that's going to be fast-paced and moving like it was in Jacksonville last year, I truly think ETN is going to be a huge talent running the RPO out there with a actual mobile quarterback and with Calvin Ridley. Literally, that team should take and run that entire division. But that being said, the talent for Breece Hall is undeniable. It showed last year in a small sample size, but it showed enough. I just get nervous about that first year off ACL. So that's the biggest thing.
One final thing, too, I think, is in terms of comparing those two players, ETN and Breece Hall, is that ETN struggled a little bit more in between the tackles, I feel, than Breece Hall. Breece Hall showed a more complete skill set.
Yeah, correct. He is a complete back.
Also, ETN struggled with fumbles. So he had the explosive playability. He showed that. They both showed that. But in terms of, grinding out an every down back roll, I see Chris shaking his head. I think Breece Hall takes the biscuit.
No, I mean, you hit it too. Like in between the tackles, ETN struggled, and on the goal line, he struggled on those in between the tackles. And I think Tank Bigsby comes in and takes a lot of those goal line touches away, which is, again, I'm not fading ETN. I still value him up there as a guy. But I just see there's more hurdles in his way than Breece Hall, and
opponents.
But I was gonna say Breece Hall's got the tougher schedule, I think, first in the division, obviously. But I think at the end of the day,
got to play Miami twice.
When you look at it too, the biggest hurdle is coming off of an ACL tear. Like nowadays, it's quicker, it's easier, but if I'm going to put my money on one of my first two picks, I'm taking the guy that's not coming off an ACL tear. That's just my opinion. If Breece Hall is my second running back off the board, then I'm taking him over ETN because the talent's there. So let's move on, Chris. I know you got something you wanted to chat with us about, so let's kick it off.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the rookie quarterbacks this year. So we have a couple of guys that are going to be look like they're going to be week one starters between CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, not yet, but we all expect him to have a significant role in that offense or take the starting job relatively early in the season. What are you guys' thoughts? Like, I tend to think that CJ Stroud is kind of going to come into the best situation, but within the last week or so, I really like Bryce Young, and kind of for the same reason. There's a lot of like unsung heroes there. With the wide receiver core, there's Thielen, Mingo, they drafted Terrence Marshall Jr. and DJ
Chark.
DJ Chark. They got talent there. So I think with Miles Sanders too, it's going to take a lot of the brunt off the running game from him. So I think I'm kind of torn between those two. I want to hear your guys' opinions on maybe Anthony Richardson or where you guys see those two finishing in fantasy.
I love Anthony Richardson. I think he went into a great situation, almost the perfect situation. I mean, that coach was the one who groomed Jalen Hurts, and this guy is a bigger, faster, stronger Jalen Hurts. He's got weapons around him in Pittman. He's got Jonathan Taylor. They have a decent defense. That division is very winnable. I'm really high on Richardson this year. Really high.
So I'm gonna say right now, Bryce Young is gonna be the best rookie quarterback out there. And this is my thought process and reasoning behind it. You've got a veteran running back in Miles Sanders, so that's always going to help your team out, versus CJ Stroud has a second-year Dameon Pierce who needed volume to be successful in that anemic offense.
And Singletary.
Yeah, but we all know that lion's share is going to end up going to Dameon Pierce unless for some injury or anything happens, because he earned it. But that being said, you've got Bryce Young going into a situation with a veteran running back, a veteran receiver in Adam Thielen. And I'm not saying Adam Thielen is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but that guy's going to actually help out the rest of that receiving core, especially Jonathan Mingo. And then DJ Chark was in a small role that he had last year at the Lions, was very successful. And if you look at the numbers and the breakdown at all, he actually was a huge proponent, a huge help to that offense. And I think at the end of the day, Bryce Young has got those veterans around him, those tools to help him in a young offense that is in a division that isn't fantastic. Their defenses has holes all around it. I don't care how much money Atlanta threw at their defense. It's still Atlanta. So when you break it all down, he probably has the easiest pathway to success, because when you look at the other division, you've got Colts in a division. Yeah, you face Houston, but Houston's got some good D-backs, especially after their most recent pickups.
Well, CJ Stroud's in that division too.
And exactly. And CJ Stroud they have to face the Titans, and they got to face the Jags, who both had decent defenses this past season too. And historically, the Titans have been good. So I just think the path to success is a little bit easier for Bryce Young, even though the pressure's on him to be because he's the number one guy. So
I'll say this with Bryce Young, and Lambros, I'll let you jump in to give us your opinion too. But I'll say this with Bryce Young: like, a lot of the comparison over the last week and a half has been like to Drew Brees, and this is coming from teammates. And I think that speaks a lot in terms of what he does in the classroom, how he is accurate with the ball. Like, I don't care about his size, I really don't. Like, that doesn't matter to me. We've seen the arm strength there. But the accuracy is something that's great. And they have a lot of weapons that, if you have an accurate quarterback with DJ Chark, with Adam Thielen, again, it's the same kind of reason I like CJ Stroud, is they have this piecemeal weaponry around him where none of them are elite guys, but there's a lot of talent and a lot of different skill sets that are in that group. So I do like both those guys. And I'll add this to the conversation. Do you guys think that there's any other rookie quarterbacks that we're not talking about that might make an impact this year?
I don't think so. Not at all. I mean, unless you're counting Sam Howell as a rookie, but no.
I do think so. Who's the kid who came out of Virginia? Hooker? Was it?
Tennessee.
No, he was at Tennessee. Hendon Hooker.
Tennessee? Yeah.
No.
Where did he end up? I thought he was a complete quarterback.
You don't think your Georgia boy pushes Stafford for that job?
That's
I'm
true
not,
too.
even if he does, it's not a season long immediate impact, and expect growing pains.
It's a good landing.
Listen, he's a dog. He's a dog, no pun intended. I like that guy as a quarterback. I think he is underrated in terms of what he's done. He's not like Tim Tebow, where he's going to be this college star and not be able to translate, because he actually has an arm and he actually, is mobile and can make plays. But no,
Hendon
Stafford.
Hooker went to
Detroit. Yeah, he's
Goff.
behind the
If
Goff.
you see an injury to Goff, I think Hooker could make some noise.
Well, remember, he's coming off a significant knee injury as well.
ACL injury too.
And that was late in the season too.
Yeah, but he's ready to go. I still think the big three. You could throw, the only other person you could throw in there is Will Levis with Tennessee, and we already know that right now he's third on the depth chart.
Yeah.
So Malik Willis is still there
and not looking good.
Yeah.
The thing
Not
that
looking good
I
in
is
OTAs.
just general pause in general on rookie quarterbacks. I'd like to get you guys' opinion. We're talking about, right, who's going to finish the highest among the three of these guys, or who do we feel the most comfortable about? Most people, It's Richardson. But you've heard that the intangibles for CJ Stroud are through the roof. Obviously, Bryce Young had a lot of success in college. For me, I'm a person who drafted Trey Lance last year, I believe. And so I felt the impact of this hyped rookie very directly.
You drafted him
2 years ago, maybe it was. Okay. So I've been on the rookie bandwagon. John has been on the rookie bandwagon. You had I think Kyler Murray you drafted in his rookie year, and you had some success with that. And when you look historically at rookie quarterbacks, obviously it's few and far between, even amongst the greats that have a lot of success their first year. So that's where it brings me a lot of pause in all these highly touted rookies. But they all walk into pretty good situations, you have to admit. And so one of them, if not multiple of them, should have usable seasons in fantasy, but I don't think you feel really good about taking any one of them to start your season off.
Well, the thing with Kyler Murray when he came in is he wasn't in a great situation either. But this is what I liken Bryce Young to, and Kane, I'll let you get to your point, is Bryce Young is an accurate passer. He's an accurate passer across the board. And that's why Kyler Murray went number 1 too. Like, even at the size that Kyler Murray is, he was one of the most accurate passers in college football, if not the most accurate, and he was known to put a ball on a dime, and Bryce Young could do the same thing, and that's what's going to give you the success. I love the intangibles that Anthony Richardson brings to the table, because Cam Newton did that for Carolina and was very successful too as well. But the difference between that is he had a 60% completion percentage his rookie season for Carolina. Anthony Richardson, in his only full season in Florida, had an abysmal completion percentage. And he's going to really need to climb up that hill with a group of really unproven receivers, except for Michael Pittman, who's, like I said before, a contested catch guy who you got to be accurate when throwing to 50-50 ball people. You need to get the ball in a place where they can only catch it. And so that's the only thing that scares me about Richardson. Do I think he's got the
50 ball though?
Well, you know what I mean? A contested, like a ball where like he's going to win. He's going to win the opportunity.
So let me ask you guys. Let me ask you this: do you think?
Hold on, let Kane get his point in. I interrupted him a second ago.
I understand what you guys are saying, but over the past couple of years, we've seen this trend and this almost cheat code come through with the quarterbacks, and that is the rushing quarterback. Mm-hmm. It just propels you to that next level. And when you're talking about rookies, no matter what their completion percentage was in college, Peyton Manning threw the most interceptions his rookie year.
Yeah.
That safety with the added ability to rush the ball, I think, is what makes me a little bit more comfortable in a guy like Richardson, where with the coach he has, they're going to really spend the time designing the offense to make him comfortable and fit around him. And that safety net of that rushing is what kind of settles my nerves at the end of the day.
Can I counter you really quick? So I completely agree. There's 2 points. A, it's been a while since a rookie quarterback's come in and been a top 10 at the position in fantasy. Now, if we're talking dynasty league, completely love drafting rookie quarterbacks. But if we're talking redraft, yearly redraft leagues, rookie quarterbacks are a late round guy that you might get as a backup that might come out later in the season. Mm-hmm. My second point is, if you like the rushing upside, CJ Stroud has rushing upside. And so if we think that Anthony Richardson is going to go off for 1,000 yards, which I don't think that's reasonable. Let's say he has a good rushing season with the rushing quarterbacks that we've seen. Let's say he rushes for 700 yards. CJ Stroud still has the ability to go for 300-400 yards, but he has a lot more weapons and can throw the ball more accurately and better down the field than Anthony Richardson can. And I think he has a better complement of weapons around him. So I get the perception of like, yeah, the rushing cheat code, and there's a rushing cheat code, but Joe Burrow finished number 3 last year and only had 300 yards rushing. So there is a rushing cheat code, but when it comes down to total touchdowns, that's what matters for quarterbacks. And
it doesn't because Justin Fields finishing number 7 only had 19 total touchdowns.
But he ran for 1,000 yards.
He rushed for 1143, and if and that's what you need to do if you have that cheat code, because he only threw for 20.
But I would add with Justin Fields. It's funny you brought him up because he was who I was going to mention. You look at his rookie season; he played 12 games, so he started the majority of games, and he only had 420 rushing yards. Like the playbook didn't catch up to him his rookie season or whatever the case was. He started having success his second year once they started to use his talents the way they need to be used. And so I think for all of these guys, unless otherwise.
I'd say in dynasty or keeper leagues, Richardson's the one I go with. In long term, I think he's the one you go with for sure. Okay. Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
but not for
looking at ceiling for Stroud is probably a higher end than an Anthony Richardson. But if we're talking redraft and you're looking for a guy to grab this year, and God forbid your quarterback goes down, and I need to have that backup guy on my bench, so it's more of a safer floor with the rushing of.
But one's a starter and one's not right now.
He's saying if we're projecting Anthony Richardson to be the starter.
Yeah, all right.
Which we'll know that by draft time. So. But, I mean, all right, let's move on. I think we kind of beat a dead horse here. I think we kind of know that you go with C.J. Stroud, you go with Bryce Young. You know, that's our recommendation if you're going to look – you want that rookie quarterback.
Was that a Colts pun?
If you want –
Were you saying we're beating a dead horse?
Well, I would have said you'd beaten a dead colt. But if you want Anthony Richardson – at the end of the day, for that rushing upside, he is a guy to take. Know that he may not start the season, and know he may have a little bit of growing pains compared to the other ones. I think they're all going to have it. So, but if you take somebody early, like you get a Josh Allen, and then you want to go in your last pick of the draft and go get Anthony Richardson, or in standard scoring, or if in PPR, because it doesn't matter for quarterback. But at the end of the day, if you want to go with that situation, great. But if you're going with a late quarterback, and you're going to put all your eggs in that basket and want to risk it, it's up to you. We don't recommend it here. Nick, what do you got for us here? I know we talked a little bit earlier, and I told you to save it for tonight.
So I think there's an interesting narrative. It's just a cute little pun on the names, which is the tale of two Derricks. But when you look at first Derrick Carr and where he is going / not going this summer in mock drafts, his ADP is anywhere from 123 overall to 150, and being taken at the quarterback 11 to 13, which honestly isn't that bad. That's about where he finished last year. He's being taken as the 19.
Yeah, 19. I was just say 11 is way too high for Derek Carr.
Yeah, so 11th to 13th round, 123 to 150 overall, 11th, 13th round. So he's basically free, and for me, I like narrative as well going into a season. Obviously, there is a real thing with guys going into their contract year. He's not. He signed a big contract. But when you look at the Saints, and I'll throw it out to you guys just quickly to set the stage, you've got him coming up. There's reports that his wife was made to cry by whatever the release situation was there with the Raiders. He's going in. You could say that he's angry at the way that fell out. He walks into a talented situation, into a talented team with a chip on his shoulder. And for the Saints to not have the consistency at quarterback really since Drew Brees, I think this is a change in the locker room. You're hearing reports that they've had like 100% attendance at camp. He's having a rapport with Michael Thomas, whether he plays a whole 17 games or not is to be determined. But we know he has Chris Olave, a huge emerging talent that's been only overshadowed by his counterpart, Garrett Wilson. But he's a great talent in himself. We don't know on Kamara yet, but we know they signed Jamal Williams. It looks the defense is probably the best defense that he's played under and is going to get him the ball. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. And for a guy that's going right now as the QB 19, I think that's a steal right now. It maybe not your starting quarterback, but if you do go take one of these rookies that we were just talking about, maybe who you have to grab earlier, especially Anthony Richardson, maybe you want to bookend that with a Derrick Carr later in your draft because you know he's going to probably play all 17 seasons. He's pushed 5,000 yards passing before. He's pushed over 30 yards or 30 touchdowns before. So I think there's a lot to like. And then the second is Derrick Henry, which, you don't really have to read over this guy's stats. But when you look under the hood at what this guy did last year, despite where he's being taken, which is the running back 12 right now, or his ADP is 112. He's your fifth, anywhere from your fifth to maybe, I don't know, sixth or seventh, eighth running back off the board. For a guy that led the league last year in attempts in his 28-year-old season, he's now one more year removed from that foot injury. I don't see anything that points to them going away from him. So their volume is going to be there. I just think that, I was talking to John about it. He had the second most yards behind Josh Jacobs. He had the second most touchdowns behind Jamal Williams with a real outlier season. So he quietly did Derrick Henry things. And so to suggest that Bijan Robinson should be taken in front of him, to suggest that Jonathan Taylor and even Saquon, I know Jono's our resident Giants fan here, but still, I think that Derrick Henry going at the end of the first round and sometimes in the beginning of the second is absolutely insane. He's only
listen, I will agree with you.
Point of that offense, but I'll throw it out to you.
Yeah, I will agree with you on the Derrick Henry. I think he is being.
I know you guys like him. You had him as your number 5.
Well, we have him as our number 5, unanimous number 5 in our rankings. But I think he's being treated. He's getting the Nick Chubb treatment here. People are trying to create this outside narrative that, he's not going to get 300 carries again. He's not going to have the efficiency again. He's old. He's not tread on the tires. He has done nothing to prove that to anybody yet. He's done nothing but prove that he does have tread on the tires. He can go for almost 300 carries, and he can still be a top 5 finisher in not only fantasy, but in the league itself. So Derrick Henry, I agree with you on. Derrick Carr, I do not. Now, the one sentiment you made about drafting him as a backup, or something like that, or a secondary quarterback, I'll agree with you on that one. It is an opportunity, but the guy has been nothing but a fairy tale failure in fantasy, in my opinion. I'm going to give him that name, a fairy tale failure, because he has all this allure around him. He's a gunslinger. He throws it down the field. He's got a great ball. He always has a good receiver around him, and he always seems to finish no higher than quarterback 12. And it amazes me. He threw for 4,800 yards 2 years ago, but couldn't throw for over 30 touchdowns. He threw for 24 or 25 that year. He literally, year after year, and I just did a quick little retake on it. He was quarterback 12, his best finish in 2016. He was quarterback 13 2 years ago in 2021 when he threw 4,800 yards. But when you're a quarterback in the NFL since 2014 and you haven't broken into the top 10 yet, and he's missed a game here or there, but for the majority of the seasons, he's played the whole season. He's a tough guy, and I like him. He's got grit. He's got talent. But where he's being drafted in quarterback, 17 to 19 is probably the range you should put him at. He's in a new offense, a new team. He's learning everything new players around him. There's going to be growing pains. And I don't see the same situation like Kirk Cousins had these 2 big rolling seasons as top 10 quarterback in fantasy from Washington, all of a sudden going to Minnesota and having Adam Thielen and the talent there to just roll into that season. Derrick Carr had struggles, whether it be touchdown versus interception, whether it be lack of yardage, whether it be lack of a rushing game around him. I don't think he's had a situation that's been a perfect storm for him. So I'm off the Derrick Carr train. I'm not off Olave, I will say that, but I'm off the Derrick Carr train.
One other thing to just add in there as we discuss these two guys is that Derrick Henry is also in a contract year. So I think that means something.
He'll be 30 next year.
He'll be 30 next year, but
he'll get a contract somewhere.
He'll be looking to prove that
he'll get a 1 or 2 year deal with somebody or an extension with the Titans. But yeah.
Or what about a midseason trade?
Yeah, I don't see that. Maybe.
Here's the thing: the Titans aren't in this close to a rebuild situation. The Titans still have the talent around them to win ball games and make the playoffs.
2 years ago, they were in the playoffs.
Exactly, they should have been in the playoffs last year. But what I'm saying is they're in situations where they can do that. Derrick Henry pushes them over the edge. I don't see them trading for him because I don't think they're going to get enough stock in it. That's the thing. I don't think anybody's going to pay enough for him, especially becoming a free agent in a contract year.
You try to win this year with him in his last contract year, or you gain like a 5th round pick for him. That's the reality of it, and that's what running backs go for. Even though their name is Derrick Henry, other than Christian McCaffrey, who is San Francisco everyone thought they were crazy for what they gave up for him, but he went to a playoff contender. I mean, they were literally any quarterback away from making the Super Bowl.
McCaffrey's also just turned 27, so I mean, he's still young.
So I'll say this about the Derrick Henry and this is going with his ADP and where he's fallen. There's a trend in the industry on the shiny new thing, and we've seen it with so many players. Like Nick Chubb is a great example. Derrick Henry now is a great example. I mean, Derrick Henry last year was being the second guy off the board. After Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, what changed?
What changed from last year to this year? There wasn't a significant injury. I mean, I guess you can say the offensive line got a little bit worse, but the problem with Tennessee is that there's just no weapons. Like, there's no weapons around him. So it is the Derrick Henry show. It will be the Derrick Henry show, and they're gonna run this guy over 300 times again. And if he stays healthy, he's gonna do Derrick Henry things because he is a lineman that can run as fast as a running back and can literally stiff arm offensive linemen off of you. He is the king for a reason. Like, he is a gigantic human being and is the hardest tackle in the league. And so I don't Mufasa. With Derrick Henry, I think we have him in our top 5. I think he should be the 5th running back off the board. I think that you can make an argument for him being the 4th guy off the board in front of Saquon, but I think they're right there 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. I still think I like Chubb better. I like McCaffrey better, and I like Eckler better because of the offenses that they play on, and that's maybe why I like Saquon a little bit more. Is I have this is going to be weird. I have more faith in the Giants offense than I do.
But the thing about that, Chris, is you said it already, is that he's done it with nobody before. I think John and I were talking about it. It was a year where he had Julio and AJ Brown. Was the 21 year where he had his 2000?
Yeah.
Was that right? So there's less people around him now.
And there were last year. He's still.
However, that kind of strengthens the argument for him too, in terms of his value, and as much as he's going to be needed, especially the offensive line issues.
No, we agree with you. We agree with you.
I agree with you. Like I think that there's some disrespect going with him. I think it's ridiculous that Bijan's going over him. I think it's ridiculous that Tony Pollard is going over him. And Tony Pollard has never touched the ball.
How about Josh Jacobs?
I mean,
it's a different team.
I can see the argument there.
But you can make the argument for it, but
I can make the argument for him going over Derrick Henry, but I can't make the argument for Tony Pollard, who's never had over a 48% touch share out of the backfield. No. And I can't make the argument for a rookie that's going to a team with not the best offensive line in football.
And another running back that was productive last year.
Well, and Jonathan Taylor, somebody you can make the argument for Taylor too. And in my opinion, though, with Taylor it's just not as good. Like when you take 2 offensive lines that are not great, do you expect Derrick Henry to fall for 5 yards or Jonathan Taylor fight for 5 yards? I mean, that's just my comparison. It's like you got a guy that with a head of steam running is going to do a little bit more. And we already know that Taylor took a setback, that Taylor's probably going to take a setback because of quarterback play from balls out the backfield.
Fun stat was, I think that if you just count his yards after contact, Derrick Henry would have been the 5th leading rusher last year.
Yeah.
So the guy's an animal.
Just his yards. I'll say this with Derrick Carr before, and Kane, you can kind of give us opinion on both those guys. With Derrick Carr, like we talked about it in our very first episode, the New Homes episode. I think this is a better offense that he's going to. He has a better defense there. I think that, yeah, you're right. He's never finished as like a top 12 quarterback, but you're not drafting him to be that. Like, if you're drafting him in like in the 13th or 14th round, like, you can get him for essentially free. And he's a great, like, either zero quarterback strategy guy. I mean, like, I would take Jared Goff probably over him, like another guy that's going to be kind of falling down the draft boards and you can kind of get for a late round. But what's wrong with having both those guys? Because, if they cost you nothing, then you can go out there and get them. And they have Olave. If Michael Thomas comes back to anything like what he was, they have 3 solid running backs. They have Taysom Hill. They have Rashid Shaheed. Like, they have deep ball threats. I think the receiving core is better. And then,
but here's my question.
Juwan Johnson, who's a receiving tight end, who I think kind of fits the mold of almost like, he's not as lanky as Darren Waller, but he can run the routes.
He's
like
talented. But here's my question to you: when you say that you'd rather take Goff over, but let's talk about this: Derrick Carr, in anywhere, depending upon the ADP where you get your info for him, but he's anywhere around Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, Geno Smith, and Daniel Jones. Like, those are names that are like right up. They're all right above him, and so like, it's to me, I think it's a tier jump. Like, there's a tier drop from a couple of those names, and that's my opinion. So, I mean, the question is, do you want to take a chance on Russ being rusty again this year, or do you want to take a chance on Derek Carr and a new team?
That's right.
So, Kane, I'll let you chime in, and then you can segue right into your what you wanted to bring to the table.
So, one thing that actually me and Nick discussed, and I thought was a smart plan, was if you grab that Tua early, with Tua being injured, backing yourself up with a Carr in the last round or something like that is kind of like your safety valve, because, Tua's constantly getting hurt.
Yeah.
In that kind of situation, I would love a Derrick Carr, because you're not relying on him on a week-to-week basis, kind of just sit there and let's see where he goes. Let's see what he's about. I mean, I get that whole he's upset with the franchise and all that, but, new place, new offense, bring in Gruden, bring in whoever you want. The path is there. Am I excited about it? No. I think where everyone's starting to fade the Henry thing is I think it's more of the weight with the amount of carries and the age he's approaching. We saw it with DeMarco Murray when he got used and abused and just fell off a cliff. You see it with some of these guys, where the bigger guys that get constant years of 300 plus carries, 1 year just fall off the face of the earth. And he's borderline at that running back becoming dead age. Like, I'd be curious to know, when does he turn 30? Does he turn 30 in the middle of the season? Because he's 29 now.
It doesn't matter. I mean, he's ready at 29, but still, he's a unicorn, guys.
For Derrick Henry is Jerome Bettis and Jamal Lewis, and both those guys played well into their 30s and were productive. And
I would say he's even different than them.
Like, he is different than them because he's a gigantic human being.
He's faster.
I would say like Jay Ajayi. Who was the massive guy that people liked when Chris? I think you had him from the Patriots.
LeGarrette Blount. But Blunt's different. Blunt's different. Brandon Jacobs is different. They're these big guys, but they're not the pedigree of Derrick Henry. That's the difference.
Yeah, I can't say that, like, you approaching 30 is when you're ready to fall off the cliff. Like, he hasn't relied on his top end speed to get him there. So if he loses a fraction of a step, who cares? Because he's still going to run through you. It doesn't
that's my thought on Zeke Elliott too. I don't care that Zeke Elliott is lost a step. He's a between the tackles guy, and he's going to get you in the end zone. Somebody needs to sign that guy.
Right.
But anyway, Kane, move on. Let's move on to your thoughts and your topic for our roundtable here.
Okay, well, I'm going to get away from some of these players, and I want to get more of like a draft thing, since you guys just had your mock draft. Which you're in the next one, by the way. Don't worry. I'm not upset.
Just a little bit, though.
Disappointed. So my question would be is like, do you guys have a favorite spot that you like to draft from? Like one that you think is better than the other? Like you tend to do better from humble brag. The year I won from the 12 spot, on that turn. And I know some people don't like the turn. Some people love the turn, some people like being in that top 3 and getting that go-to guy, but then you don't pick again for 20 something picks. So where do you guys tend to fall in that situation?
I will say, and I'll make this short, I love the end of the first round. I like being 10, 11, 12. I don't like being 6 through 9. To me, 6 through 9 is that weird window. I wouldn't call it a dead zone. It's just a weird window, and you got to be more strategic. And Chris is really good at drafting from the 6th spot. I know that, where you can grab a guy and be strategic because you got to make sure you don't take too many chances on your picks. For me, being at the end, you get to take a chance if you want because you're getting 2 value players so close together, and I love that. Now, I like it on both ends. I don't care if I get somebody really high up and I got to wait 24 picks because I'm getting 2 people of value in that 2nd, 3rd round swing. So, like, for example, you could get someone like Waddle and T. Higgins. Boom, boom, right there. So, like, there's a lot of stuff you can do.
The ADP goes out the window when you're in that position, right? Like,
that's the whole point. The ADP does.
Long before you pick again, the ADP has to go out the window. Like, you have to realize that guys probably aren't coming back to you. So, when you're in that position, they're guys you like and you want, you got to just take them.
Well, that's why I like it because I build myself a strategy of a team I'd like to field, and it allows me to take a chance and jump on a guy earlier because I know he's not going to make it back to me if I don't take him in the next 2 picks. So, and plus you also can make an educated guess. If you're at the 10th spot, there's only 4 more picks before you, and if you know only one of the guys after you has a tight end, and that other guy's probably going to get a tight end here, you look at the board and you're saying, well, I like these next 2 guys on my list for tight ends. I don't care which one I get. You don't have to stress about taking a tight end before those 4 picks. You take the guy, on the board you want, and then boom, whoever falls to you. It's a little bit more easily to make that plan and script it on the go as it would be in the middle of the draft.
I actually kind of like the inverse of what you guys are saying is if I love drafting from a swing position. So I don't care whether that's 1, 2, 3 or 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3 I like because even 4, because you're getting one of those top end guys, and yeah, I'm missing out on all like the 2nd rounder guys, but then I'm getting 2 of the next, 5 picks or something like that. On the swings, what I like to do, instead of you guys saying you're taking a chance on a player, is you're taking a safe pick, right? And then your 2nd pick, you can really go and get whoever dropped to you. So you are actually drafting for ADP. You're getting the guys that slide down because there's always going to be guys like that. So, like, let's say I'm drafting in the 10 position. I'm going to go and draft my 10th overall player. I'm going to get value at that position, whoever came down to me. But then on the swing around, yeah, I can go and reach for a guy that I might not get in the opportunity to get the next round or the next 2 rounds. But I can also get the guy that fell down. Right. So in the mock draft, right, Stephon Diggs fell all the way down to like the 4th or the 10th pick in the 2nd round. Right. Mm-hmm. So he went all the way back around. If I'm sitting there at the 10th spot and you get that swing around, it's like, all right, well, Stephon Diggs is here. Like, that's the ADP. There's the value. And he fell to me. So let me go and grab him right there. And then you end up getting 2 guys with a higher draft ADP. I did it last year when Kels dropped all the way down to me in the 2nd round. And it's like, I wanted to get AJ Brown there. Like, I really wanted to get him because he's the follow-up. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, I can't pass up on a guy like this. Like that value, he's a 1st round talent that I can get in the late 2nd round. And that's where I'm going to go and get. So I like that strategy a little bit. But I'll say this on why I like drafting on the ends too, is it's kind of going along with what Jono said. I can kind of predict what other people are doing around me. It's hard to do that from the 5, 6, 7, 8 position because you have so many picks before you. But if I'm sitting at the 10th or like the 2nd pick, like I know who players have, like I know what teams have around me. So if a team has a quarterback and I'm eyeing to get a quarterback in the next 2 rounds, I know I should probably go and grab the guy I want. Same thing with tight end. Same thing with like a high value. If the guy next to me has 4 running backs, and I know he's going to go and grab a receiver, I better grab the one I like if I want there. So it's easy to kind of play off of other people in there.
I agree. I like that for that reason. Nick,
But
what's
just
your
to be
favorite
clear,
spot?
in our league? I've won from the 4 spot, the 5 spot, and the 10 spot.
Well, I think Chris kind of nailed everything as far as, first of all, I'll say it with the caveat that you can win out of any position, and we've all said this. Everybody's won from
They don't
different.
win in the draft.
Except that when you're in the middle of the draft, you kind of have to let the draft come to you. It's a little bit frustrating. It's a little bit slower paced, and when you're on the ends, you can kind of impose your will a little bit more and be a little bit more strategic, which I think Chris and everybody just spoke to. So obviously I'd rather be on the ends, either end for me. I'd like to be the first pick overall, but you can play out of any position that you are dealt in the draft, which most of the time it's random. So you just kind of got to deal with what you're given. But I think in some respects, drafting in the middle is a little bit more advantageous just because you can see the value that much more clearly. Although you have to wait, like you can see in the beginning of the first, in the middle of the round, you'll see which value comes down to you, and you'll let that inform your decision. And the same thing when it swings around and it swings around and swings around. So the way I like to draft is a little bit different too. In that I was talking about with Breece Hall or Travis Etienne, I'm not afraid to jump up a round and a half on a person, and I don't think anybody is. If you really like that person, you can go ahead and take them anywhere within the first couple of rounds.
Well, I'm all for that.
Yeah,
so,
we are.
Well, that was more of what I was talking about, Chris, with like the ADP out the window, right? If you're in that, let's say you're in that 3-4, right? And there's a guy you like that's in ADP is the middle of the 5th, but you want him real bad.
You know he's not getting.
You have to throw that ADP out the window and take him in the beginning of that 4th. Because
but Chris, Chris did make a great point though. When you get somebody like Travis Kelce falling to you, or a guy like a quarterback that should have been off the board already, and all of a sudden you're staring you down the barrel, like you're like, I got to take this guy here. So one of those 2 picks on that early swing on the end is going to be absorbed by that fall of the ADP and the value. But I mean, you can
do both. Is have the strategy that you have is like, yeah, I can go and reach for a player a round and a half early, or I can go on the flip side and be like, this guy fell to me and has no business being here, and I can take that. What the swing allows you to do is be able to do both. I mean, you really can. You can go and take the value ADP with the first pick, and then on the second pick, go and reach for a guy that you might not have access to in the next 2 rounds. So it allows you to have that.
I don't really like that word reach.
Reach in quotes. I'll say you got to add quotes to that word reach.
Reach.
I did that. I did this. I'm speaking with my hands here. I'm speaking with my hands.
Well, here's what I will say. And the one thing, the advantage that the middle round, or the middle of the round players and managers have in drafting is, I've noticed this in a lot of drafts, and I did it when I was middle round, is when you're in that 6, 7, 8 spot, 9 spot,
get Travis Kelce.
You literally have an opportunity to be a trendsetter. Like, you can start the trends in the middle of a round. So that you could be the first one to grab a quarterback, and then all of a sudden you'll see afterwards that next round before the turn or right after the turn, people are going to go quarterback. So then you allow that person, an ADP to fall to you that shouldn't be there in that following round. So that's the one advantage that I see a lot. You don't always see trend setting happen at the ends that often, because people don't want to miss out because they know they have 24 more picks or 20 more picks till they go again. Whereas when you're in the middle, it's a shorter period back to you, especially if you're dead middle. It's only 11 or 12 picks depending upon the round to get back to you. So you can make a trend.
I think that's where you see a lot of the tight ends go.
Tight ends, quarterbacks, certain things, and that allows you to be, like Chris and I always say, is be the trend setter. Don't be the one who finishes the trends. So, speaking of Chris, you got a second thing to talk about here for the round table today?
Yeah. So my second thing is which veteran quarterback has the most approved this year? So there are a lot of new quarterback. We just talked about Derrick Carr, right? There's a lot of veteran quarterbacks that are in new positions. Aaron Rodgers. You have Russell Wilson coming off an abysmal year. You have I'll say Geno's in that conversation, being like, can he repeat what he did last year with more talent around him? Daniel Jones just got a contract. What are some other guys that you like or don't like for guys that have a lot to prove? Like I mean I'm a Jet fan, so mine is Aaron Rodgers. I think he needs to win. I think he has a team around him, and I really like him this year as a top 5 quarterback. And my bold prediction is that he'll be this year's MVP. But what are your guys' opinions on some of these veteran guys that are either in new situations or have something to prove?
I think Jared Goff is my veteran that's got something to prove. I think I would piggyback off Aaron Rodgers because I think he's got the most to prove because everybody's going to be having their scopes on him. But I think when you look at it, Jared Goff's on a team that's expected to win a ton of games. They were expected to make the playoffs last year, or did they make the playoffs last year? And they booted Green Bay. So was that? They missed it
they
booted
They didn't
Green Bay.
make it, but they kept Green Bay
out of it. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So
it was pretty much a playoff game in Detroit.
Based on that season that they had, which was successful, and based on the fact that he's made it to the Super Bowl with the Rams. And I may have an unpopular opinion. I'll say it in a second. I think Goff's got the most to prove because they just bring weapons around him. And if they just keep giving these mediocre seasons there and his quarterback play isn't going to be up to par, there's not a lot of stake in him to release him. So, and the one thing I will say, though, is I do like Goff. I think he is talented. He was drafted high up in the draft for a reason. And I will say that right now, he would have won the Super Bowl with the Rams if he was in Matt Stafford's shoes for that Super Bowl. I think he was just as talented as Matt Stafford.
There's a lot of hate there. Like Jared Goff led their offense to be a top 5 scoring offense.
That's why I'm saying he's a lot to prove because they didn't even make the playoffs last year. Winning's what matters.
One of the worst defenses in the NFL.
I'm just saying winning's what matters. They lost some close games.
Does he need to improve the game more, or is they need to improve the team around him? Like I think he was good last year. Can he step it up? Yeah, they're putting weapons around him. Can Detroit have a winning season? Can Detroit make the playoffs? And if they can, I think it's a win for Jared Goff. And yeah, you're right. He's entering a contract year, but I don't think their success is going to be, can they play solid defense? Can they not just be a Swiss cheese defense?
Well, but that's what I'm just saying. When you're saying like if there's pressure on a veteran, on a guy, to me, he's the guy that's the pressure on him in a contract year in a team that's expected to win, expected to make the playoffs with the talent around them. I think that just sets you up for not failure, but sets you up to kind of fumble and trip up.
I'm going to set Nick and Chris up for this. Either one of you, saying that Jordan Love has a lot to prove.
No, I have 3 others. I have 3 other veterans though that do have a lot of proof. Great topic. I'll let Chris go. Do you have? Go ahead, because
So I mean, the obvious answer is it's obviously Aaron Rodgers with the way he portrays himself in the media, being the MVP.
He's inoculated.
Not making it to these Super Bowls. Just everything he's done around him. He's the obvious answer. I mean, a guy like Geno, I don't think there's that kind of pressure on. They kind of gave him a short term, more of a prove it thing. Same thing with Daniel Jones. I know it looks like a $40 million a year contract for 4 years. That's not really what it is.
No, they could opt out after 2 and not lose anything off the cap.
The thing with Goff is at the end of the day, it's Detroit. I don't think there's any pressure on Detroit. I mean, I think if it's anyone, it's Russell Wilson because the money that they invested in him, $500 million, and the garbage that he ran out there last year, and then what they did in that offseason to kind of spin it around and say, here's everything that you need on a silver platter to play halfway decent. I think he's got to be the guy,
the team traded for a coach.
Yeah, the team traded for a coach. It was like, help me help you. Help me help you.
Right.
Nick, I'll let you give your guys, and I want to bring up a couple other names.
I think they might be here.
All right, cool.
I don't know how, and nobody has Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
As a lot to prove. He got that big contract.
Yeah.
It's shit or get off the pot time. They've given him everything he's needed. The second one, and then you guys can discuss who you want to talk about, but Deshaun Watson, he's been doing things under the towel now. He got all the money in the world. He got the most money in the world guaranteed. And then the final
He's been doing things under the towel for a long time.
He's been doing things under the towel. Also has all the weapons around him with Amari Cooper. They brought in Elijah Moore, etc.
Great, yeah.
And the final one is Dak. The time is ticking on Dak. And
that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And that's a team that has a long history of wanting to win, and I think the time is ticking on Dak. So I'll just throw it back out to you guys. I don't know who of those guys, but those are all veterans, and those all meet the criteria of people.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of veterans and guys that have been in the league that have a lot to prove for their teams, and they're coming up on contracts. Like, I think even some younger players. I mean, like, I think Kyler Murray has a lot to prove this year.
Yeah, he was my other pick.
I think Mac Jones has a lot to prove this year. Like Mac Jones. Listen, there were talks last year where Billy Zappi was going to come in and take the starting
Agreed.
role.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he has as much to prove and much on the line as Kyler Murray, a former number 1 draft pick who actually was
Mac Jones
talented.
was a top 5 pick.
Yeah. Plus, I think the Mac Jones thing was more the fault of Bill Belichick Bill Belichicking himself than anything else. Because you saw what happened to Mac Jones' first year when he had Bill O'Brien as his offensive coordinator. It was set him up to make confident throws and build him. And then Bill Belichick did the typical thing that he's been doing recently, and out Bill Belichicked himself and tried to split offensive coaching between Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. Yeah, which he had no business doing. And you saw a huge regression from Mac Jones. And what did he do? He said, I made a mistake. And who did he bring back? He brought back Bill O'Brien, the guy who built his confidence.
Yeah, the Kyler Murray thing is different. The Kyler Murray thing, when you fire a coach over, and keep Kyler Murray and pay Kyler Murray, like that tells you that a team is investing in you and not the head coach that actually brought you in. So to me, that's where I think Kyler Murray's a little bit more. I think that's a little more severe.
Yeah, I think that again, there's other guys that just have. I think that there's a lot of quarterback situations that are on the line this year.
Jimmy G.
Jimmy G's another one.
Here's the one thing about Kyler Murray. I just want to put that out there. When we're talking about the whole Derrick Carr thing earlier and taking him late, I'm taking Kyler Murray late. I'm taking him late. And I'm holding on to him. Like if I go Tua, I'll go Kyler because Kyler's proven he's got the tools to be a top 5 guy.
I mean, Tannehill.
Is Kyler in a contract year?
No, Kyler got paid.
No, they just re-signed him.
Kyler got paid. And then they fired Kingsbury midseason.
They're like, go play Call of Duty. Go down with that ship.
No men.
So, Nick, you got anything you want to add to the roundtable too as well?
Yeah, so since we're talking about quarterbacks, and since I got the Jalen Waddle jersey hanging behind me over here, the shoulder, I'm a South Florida guy, but
it's a little crooked.
Your face looks a little crooked, Kane. So here's the thing, dude. I think another guy, and we've kind of beat the drum on a lot of quarterbacks, but I think that when he was on the field, and this is just a conversation just to bring up to everybody because I don't know if it's getting enough. Actually, on our last mock draft, Jesse brought this up, and it was the first time that I thought about it all off season, which is Tua Tagovailoa and his brain. And is it okay? Where are we taking Tua? What's the earliest or where does he have to drop for you to feel comfortable to take Tua as your QB1? I mean, there are some stats that are truly eye-opening. Jono was so kind enough to forward over to me. Let me see if I can find them. But if you project out Tua playing all 17 games last year, he throws for over 5,000 yards. It was 5,025, putting him at second. 37 touchdowns, putting him at second for an overall QB3 finish. And then Tyreek Hill and Waddle both have crazy statistics if they play.
They both finished top 5.
Tyreek Hill breaks the receiving record last year if Tua stays healthy.
No, I did the math with the whole Tua. He ends up being number 1 in receiving yards, but still doesn't break the record.
But all that said, how confident are you? And when it comes to draft time, is he a guy that you can feel confidently taking without a backup plan or with a backup plan, and in what round?
With a backup plan, for sure. So, with a backup plan.
I've done a short on this. I've done a short on this where I think if you look at the stats from last season, he can be a top 5 quarterback in this league, fantasy finish, if he stays healthy. That being said,
it's a big if.
That being said, I'm absolutely drafting a backup.
Yeah, you have to.
And that's the same said about Lamar Jackson, right? There's other guys there that I'm because of the risk of injury, because of how they play or that their past history, like I'm going to go and draft a backup. I've been on record saying this, and Jono doesn't agree with this, and he doesn't agree with drafting a second guy. But like,
No, I say that in tight ends. I don't agree with drafting 2 tight ends.
Well, even in quarterback, if I'm not getting my top 3 guys, which are Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Pat Mahomes, anyone after that, I'm drafting a backup for, and I'm going to try to get 2 mid-tier guys. Like I'd rather have my option of Tua and Dak to play every week than grab Tua. He gets hurt, and then I'm scrounging up I'm picking up. Baker Mayfield. I'm never going to pick up Baker Mayfield, but Jimmy Garoppolo or Daniel Jones.
So what about the one I proposed before? You take Tua and then you take Carr in the last round of the draft.
Exactly. Something like that where I'm able to grab a legit solid backup that I know if Tua gets hurt, like Tua can go out and win me weeks, but if Tua gets hurt, I did it last year at the end of the season with Jared Goff. Jalen Hurts got hurt, and I had Jared Goff to win me a championship. And if I don't go make that move, if I don't go and make the move for taking 4 quarterbacks, and
if you don't go making the move to try and screw Nick over, then you don't win the championship.
I mean, listen, I had roster spots. He didn't.
Well, here's the thing.
I had Fab left. He didn't.
We know Mike McDaniel is a wizard, but I mean, there's only so much he can do unless he's wearing like one of these giant friggin' helmets or something. Like, what happens the first time he gets a concussion? How many weeks is he out? Given how they reacted to?
Well, I think the NFL reacted to that, right? The NFL came out and said that there needs to be independent parties that come out and do concussion tests. He's probably going to be missing, like he's not going to play the next week. He's probably going to be missing at least 2 weeks after that.
And Mike White is there, so Mike White maybe is a logical backup to have if you draft Tua. I mean, if you want to go that route.
I mean, maybe. I mean, like, I think that there's a lot Mike McDaniels can do. I mean, you kind of saw that this a little bit last year when Tua came back. Is like there's a lot of short stuff. It's get the ball out of Tua's hand really quickly. Yeah. Run the ball, get the ball out of his hands. There wasn't a lot of 5-step dropbacks without them kind of scheming that in to where he's gonna not get a lot of pressure against him. It's also training Tua to like don't get hit. Like look at Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady late in his career.
Eli Manning.
Not Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, like those guys when they feel pressure, they just go down.
They're milk toast, dude. They literally fold, but they don't like try and.
You got to imagine. You got to imagine they're going to be working on that this offseason.
Oh yeah.
Well, he already said that they were working. He was working with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor on how to properly fall. So I mean, I don't care what it takes. He's going to be on the field and he's going to do everything.
With that said, is it worth? Where would you take him?
To me, I like him so much, and you got to always draft like somebody's going to be healthy. There is an inherent risk with him, obviously based on last year, but I think our people are inflating it a little bit too much. I am taking
right now. He's the 13th quarterback off the board.
I'm taking him inside the 10. I'm taking him inside the 10 for quarterbacks to throw. I'd probably take him as QB7. 8th,
9th round is where he's being taken right now.
I'd probably take him, and I've got the names up over here. I'm obviously not taking him ahead of the top 5 because of just the upside there. But when I look at the rest of the guys on this list that are right next to his name, I'm definitely going to take him above Prescott. I'm definitely going to take him above Watson.
Take him over Rodgers?
I take him over Rodgers. I take him over Cousins. I take him over Justin Fields.
You take him over Trevor Lawrence?
I take him over Trevor Lawrence.
Wow.
But here's the thing: you're taking
have him as your number 6.
It was his. Yeah, I have him. I essentially have him as my because I have. I think I have Lamar Jackson as my number 6.
I thought you just said you take him over Lamar Jackson.
No, I take him over Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. So I've got Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, Jackson, and Herbert all above him.
I mean, I probably have him there on my 8th quarterback. Yeah, he's within my top 10.
I take him over Fields. I'll take him over Fields too.
Wow.
He's right there with Fields with me.
Because to me, it's just going to come down to total yardage versus touchdowns. I just think the touchdowns he's going to have more. I mean, he was on pace for 37 last year, not getting hurt, and that's on pace. Like he had a chance to be more than that in 3 or 4 touchdown games.
Yeah, how many times did we see him throw a 5-yard pass to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle and then do all the work?
Gone.
He doesn't need to do it.
So this one kind of ties into where I wanted to go next. So
let's go for it.
what I have to say is I tend to look for risk mitigation, and especially with someone like Tua, that if is a huge if, you know? So if I'm staring down the barrel and I have a Tua, or I have, who was one of the other guys you mentioned?
Dak or Deshaun Watson.
Trevor Lawrence.
A Trevor Lawrence. I would probably tend to lean that Trevor Lawrence way, just because that's what would factor into how I would play it. Because
I mean, you already said it with the Breece Hall and ETN. You know, you'd rather have ETN just because he's not coming off an injury. So it falls in line with kind of like that same mentality. I just think that they're with those guys, that their ceiling is so much higher, and they still have a decent floor. It's hard for me to pass up on that risk.
Yeah.
But I see where you're coming from. Like, yeah, I understand like the risk mitigation on that. But
do you mitigate that risk? Yeah.
With
the backup.
There's no question that he's a multi-week absence guy. Probably, if he goes down with a concussion.
Concussion. But concussions are different than like these soft tissue issues that people have.
Sure, yeah,
they're unpredictable. So that being said, unless you're Austin Collie, but that being said, because of that, you can't predict that he's going to be out. If he gets one, yes, it's multiple weeks. But I'm predicting that he's not going to have a concussion all season, and he's playing all 17 because of that. But Kane, let's keep going.
So that kind of ties into my thing of this consistency thing. I think that it's nice that when we grade these players and we look at these kinds of things, it's nice to look at their end of season finishes. But I think something that needs to be pointed out is their week to week finish and consistency charts. And guys are doing it already. So this is nothing new that I'm talking about. But you'll see it with guys like Jamal Williams last year, where he was finishing standard as the 8th overall, but
7th.
He had six weeks where he busted, which means out of the top 36.
So did Jamar Chase.
Okay, but that's what I'm trying to. I want to get your guys' handle on. So when you're looking at building a team, this is roster construction from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Where does that consistency play into you? Because when we've just talked about it, I usually tend to lean more towards a guy that's going to get me, 10 points a game and finishes the wide receiver 15 than a guy who's going to get me, games where he gets 30 points, but games where he gets 0 and finishes as the wide receiver 10, 3 spots above him or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I that's the sentiment I go in every year with, right? It's when I'm drafting in my first overall pick every year is a safe guy. Like, it's a guy I know that it has to be safe. Like, I'm not going for a risky pick. Like last year, like I end up getting Christian McCaffrey, and that's a guy like I know what his floor is going to be. I know that at least when I drafted him, he was on Carolina. Like, I knew he didn't have like a super high ceiling, but I still knew he was safer than, at that point, Dalvin, Kamara. Like, Kamara went right after me, and that's a guy I didn't really feel that I really wanted. Even going with like Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson, like I just felt safer with going Christian McCaffrey, and that goes into like the value. We talked about this earlier. The value on coming back around on the swing, and where I like to draft is, even in the second round. And the third round, even, I'm probably not being risky until the 4th round, where I'm taking a guy that I'm like, I just love his ceiling. Like, that's my first 3 picks. I want to be safe. And last year, my first 3 picks were McCaffrey, Kels, and Eli Mitchell. And Eli Mitchell fell to me, and at that point, he was the starting running back on San Francisco, and I locked up 2 running backs there. And I was like, okay, I have a safe guy. Like, I know he's not gonna break off for, 2,000 yards or 1,500 yards, but he's gonna rush for 1,000 because of that offense. Probably get 8 or 9 touchdowns, and I love it there. And then I started getting risky in the 4th round, and so you have to I think you have to have balance on both of them. Like, you have to have guys that can throw up those 30-point weeks, because you're going to go against guys that can throw up 30 points in a week. So
Yeah.
you have to have some of those guys on your team. It's a matter of being like, can you get 4 or 5 players that all hit 10 points? If you can get 4 to 5 players that all hit 10 points, then all you need is 2 guys to go in and bust through their ceiling.
But I mean, if you look at any player out there, even the top guys, there's off weeks for everybody. I mean, Josh Jacobs led the entire NFL in rushing last year. It wasn't until week 4 where he started really rolling, and then he had 12 straight weeks where there were only 2 weeks out of those 12 weeks where he was outside the top 10 in running backs. So like that helped him out with the consistency in the middle of that team, and then he fell off again towards the end of the season. You know, same thing for Nick Chubb. He's had weeks outside the top 40. Saquon Barkley had weeks outside the top 40. Derrick Henry did. So they're going to have those, but the times they have those are few and far between in comparison. And
Well,
you usually can if it's not for injury, you can usually tell based on the defenses they're playing, hey, they're probably not going to be somebody who's going to go for 100 and something yards. But you build, like Chris said, you build your team. And like last year, I got Jefferson, who fell to me in the 9th pick. And I turned around and I took Saquon, who went a little bit, I took him, according to ADP, a little bit earlier than some of the running backs, a probably safer running back like Chubb, who was right after him. I could have taken a little bit more safer pick. But the opportunity, in my opinion, for Saquon Barkley, who's a home run hitting guy, it wasn't a risky pick, but I just knew offense was going to run through him.
Here's the example. And like I had Miles Sanders on my team last year, so I kind of understand and feel this pain, right? You look at end of season rankings. Miles Sanders finished what, 13? I think it was 13th or something like that.
Higher than
running
that.
backs.
Yeah, higher than that. Top 10.
9, right?
Yeah, he was a top 10.
He had 8 weeks where he was outside the top 36. So
he was number 10.
Hurt you more?
10.
Or did he help you more? Like that kind of finishing as the 9 is a misleading thing because he finished at the 9.
Oh well.
But half the time you used him, he was outside a top 36 running back. Now you didn't draft him to be that. I understand that. But
I see what you're saying, but I think that's tougher to predict because you even look at someone like, I'm looking at it right here. You look, sorry, real quick. You look at Austin Eckler and you look at his game log last year. The dude was top, I think, 8 or 9 for a big chunk of the season, but he started the season off at running back 31, running back 36. He had a running back 30, a running back 25, a running back 35, a running back 16. Like, those guys who finish at the top there at the end of the season, they will have some off weeks, but they're going to also have the weeks where they just blow people out of the water and they win you that week. I don't think they're ever going to lose you a week either, though. Like, it was a weird one for Jalen Waddle to get me 9 yards on one catch one week without an injury. So,
let me chime in here for a second. First of all, Chris, your face isn't crooked. I think my picture is crooked, but I was just looking at the the average points per game here. And I think actually looking at it, this is standard scoring. I think that you brought up Miles Sanders. It was. I think he's the exception to the rule because he finished last year per this is Fantasy Pros. He finished as the number 10 standard running back, and I think he was the 14th per game. The top points per game was Derrick Henry, who finished 3rd. The second was Josh Jacobs, who finished 1st. The 3rd was Christian McCaffrey, who finished 2nd. The 4th was Austin Eckler, who finished 4th. The 5th was Nick Chubb, who finished 5th. And the 6th was Saquon Barkley, who finished 6th. So outside of that discrepancy that you note, it's really not that significant in terms of where they finished and their point per game production. So
it's not a point per game production. It's more of like an end of season thing. Like I sit here and I tell you, Miles Sanders finishes the 9th overall running back in fantasy this year.
10th,
you go, oh wow, Miles Sanders was great this year.
But he was 14.
Look at it, and eight out of all the weeks you play, 8 of those weeks, if you drafted him to be your RB2, he hurt you because
you have to take the average,
RB4
though, right?
or less.
You should take the average, though, right?
Listen, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but like, all right, you look at
Devonta Smith is another example.
No, like
I think Jalen Waddle is the biggest.
Look at Mixon. Mixon's a great example for this. All right, because he finished RB13. Okay, right. So 3 spots behind Miles Sanders, and he had sub 10-point weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, and he missed 2 weeks. He had a 51-point week. So that boosted his numbers up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he finishes as a 13. But like that 1 week where he put up 51 points, he played against me that week. I lost by a lot. He won the week. But the other games
Be mindful. Be mindful. Don't take that end of season finish for it being an end of season finish and how he did the entire.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Take that because look at Jamar Chase, right? And Jamar Chase is actually a good example of this because he missed 5 games last week, so last year, so he finishes as the wide receiver 12, right? He's much better. If you look at him on a per game basis, he's much better than that, right? But he still dudded 6 weeks out of it.
He did. But here's a better example, and I want to throw this out there. Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle had a 18 with Tua, it was 19.1, but 18.1 yards per reception. Led the NFL. That stat alone should be like, I want that guy because every time he catches the ball, that guy's going, right? But he also had finishes of 58, 77, 97, 66, 45, 34. And then he had finishes of 14, 4, 2, 6, 3, 6. Like that is what Kane's kind of talking about. Is there's not consistency amongst the board, but the consistency was that he was getting 18.1 yards per reception. So it's not just the finish. The consistency can be found in different aspects. Like the fact that I know Waddle is going to get double digits per reception every time he gets the ball. So if he gets 5 catches with 18 yards per reception, you could guarantee yourself pretty close to 80 yards on that game. So I see what you're saying. To heed the warning because ADP is built off of what they did last year and what their projections are going to be this year too. So
maybe what that highlights also is just volume, because looking at it, like another guy I was going to bring up is Aaron Jones. He's a guy who's notorious for having 4 or 5 touchdown games and then disappearing. And so he could be
11.
Yeah, he finished 11, but his points per game, I think, are somewhere outside of the top 15. Alvin Kamara is another guy. He's had 7 touchdowns in a game. So,
those are the riskier picks.
You're looking at Jacobs, Chubb, you're looking at Eckler, you're looking at those top guys for a reason because they're more consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's only about 5 guys at each position that are going to be consistent week in and week out. Now you can get lower ceiling guys that are going to be more consistent, but you kind of have to piecemeal them. Like, you get 2 or 3 of those guys that might be streaky. Like that's going to go into like a different topic, which is management in season. It's not about drafting those guys and having the projection for where they're going to be. It's noticing trends in season where they're more involved in the offense because of an injury or because the offense is scheming a certain way. Last year I did it with Nico Collins, or I did it with Isaiah Hodges, and I did it with Mecole Hardman. And those guys started being more involved in their offense for a couple of weeks. And if you piecemeal all 3 of those guys together over a 8-week period, then you're getting consistency because you're hitting that 10-point threshold with those guys. And what it allows you to do is, have the guys like Ramondre Stevenson or CMC being able to blow up and then win you weeks, or Jalen Hurts win you weeks because you have other guys that's their role on your team is to go and have those 20+ point weeks. But if you have high floor guys that are just being more involved and you can kind of be more predictive of touchdowns in season, then those are valuable guys to have. But that's hitting the waiver wire, watching the games and seeing how they're being schemed. Hey, look at the red zone targets. If they're being targeted more in the red zone over this 4-week span, or if they have great matchups coming up for a week, that's in season management more than it is drafting. Like it's hard to, I agree with you, Ken. It's really hard to look at end of season stats and draft according to that because you're like, oh yeah, Miles Sanders finished as the 10th overall running back, but yeah, you take a deeper dive into his numbers and his efficiency was a little bit down from all those other the top 10 guys. Mm-hmm. And now he had the most touches and most carries in his career last year. We can assume that those numbers might go down, right? We usually see plateauing or some kind of regression from career highs, other than Justin Jefferson, where his career highs just keep increasing every year.
By 200 and 20. 200 yards and 20 targets have increased every season.
Yeah. But
So, no, I agree with
John,
you.
what-
I think it's a good point.
yeah, John, what was your last topic?
I mean, my biggest one was more or less, I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with bringing it up because I didn't think it was like a great thing, but it was more or less going to see, like, is there a trend in fantasy football that's going on that you think is outstayed its welcome, or is like
PPR.
one of these things? Well, we know we already talked about our PPR, but I want to call that a trend because that got more than just a trend. But I'm talking about like these
Full point.
leagues with bonus scoring points for 50-yard plus touchdowns, point per rush, and like all these stuff. Or like you could even say is like, do you think that kickers are a thing of the past? I mean, I know Kane agrees with that one. Just one of the things that bothered me and what made me think about it was just every year we find a way to see that total score be higher. Like, how can we make our total scores be higher? And I think that's the wrong way to go if you're a commissioner of a league, and I happen to be the commissioner of ours. So I think you need to find the best way to make it even across the board. And if you're playing in a PPR league, well, maybe a half point per rush, or maybe a bonuses for large rushes or receptions or passes maybe could help mitigate the fact that you're imbalancing your overall scoring system as it is. But what I think to me is by adding new things to try and keep it more arcadey and gamify it just to see bigger scores is, I don't know. It bothers me. It's so, I mean, you see these leagues that the biggest one that I've seen, this is what made me annoyed by listening to it. It's these leagues that have these tight ends where they get 1.5 points per reception in a PPR league. So they get more. It's tight end. I forget they call it. It's tight end heavy or something, but they get more volume. So somebody like Travis Kelce is the number one pick in that league.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, like, why are we doing something like that?
So I really dislike any kind of strategy that takes away from the in-game or the in-season management of your team. So, you look at like PPR, and especially full point PPR, where like you can really draft a set it and forget it lineup for the entire year, and minus an injury, you never have to touch and bye weeks, you never have to touch your team.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with all these bonuses. Like, why should a guy that broke 100 yards get more bonuses? Like, you already are getting 10 points from getting the yardage boost. So why should you get a 1 or 2 point bonus for that? The same thing with PPR is like, you caught a ball. Congratulations. I don't get points for completion, and I don't get points for rush attempt. So why should I get points for a reception? And in the PPR format, then why don't you have the negative points if you have a drop pass, right? Like, you don't have the negatives. I can, like, listen, over the last couple of years, our league has talked about getting rid of the kicker, and I can get on board with that, like, and adding another flex spot, or we can talk about different strategies. About,
well, the guys at CBS talked about having the kicker be absorbed into the defenses, so that it's all one thing. So you get points on your defense special teams for a field goal, as well. So you don't have an individual kicker to get.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad strategy. I think that's not a bad strategy, or replacing the kicker with a defensive player, or there's a bunch of things you can do. I'd be on board with getting rid of kickers, but yeah, I mean, like the unnecessary points is the trend that I don't like, and it's the same reason you don't like it, Jono, is it's just points for being points, and it's taken away from the actual strategy of managing your team in season. If I can go and I guess that's easy for the guys that play in 13, 14, 15 leagues.
Yeah. And
they're just like, I'm just going to draft a team PPR. That's the most points. I'm going to draft these players, and I'm going to set it and forget it. And then at the end of the year, you're like, oh, I'm a champion, and I made the playoffs in 6 out of my 15 leagues. Like, look at me, I'm so good.
Well, that's more of like best ball.
Winning 1 of 1 or winning 2 of 2.
Yeah. Well, best ball's another one that is a fantasy trend to me that gets annoying.
Set it and forget it.
Yeah, that's annoying because it is set it and forget it. It takes away
they make your best lineup every week.
Yeah, exactly. It takes away the sportsmanship and the whole aspect of having to manage it.
I don't understand why not just do DFS at that point? Like, why do you do like in season fantasy football, like
season
just
long,
do DFS?
I like
try to win money.
DFS is fun. I like DFS.
I like DFS.
Because it is different. But, I mean, it's all PPR, too. So it's like.
Brought to you by FanDuel.
I wish, right?
So why do we track yards?
We're here. So
also DraftKings.
DraftKings, we're here, too. Yeah.
Monkey
Underdog Fantasy, we're here, too. But, I mean.
Caesars.
Sleeper.
Now,
You're welcome,
let's close it out here. Do you, Kane or Nick, do you guys have any fantasy trends outside of those ones? I know there's not a ton of them, so that's why I kind of was.
I've got a couple. The first, I think, is not a trend or stat as much as kind of throwing ADP. We talked about this all night. Actually, is ADP is irrelevant in terms of if you.
But that is a trend in fantasy football. ADP.
It is a trend. I mean, we talk all summer about ADP. Everybody, the whole industry, quote unquote, talks about ADP this, ADP that. But ultimately, like it can be thrown out the window. And then I think the second one is to Chris's point, which is how valuable in terms of roster management, how valuable bench spots are. And how quickly you need to make decisions on players if they're not playing, what to do with them. It's something I struggle with a lot and looking to get better on. But anything that takes away from piggybacking off Chris, anything that takes away from managing your roster in terms of bench spots, I think is valuable to consider when managing your team. And then the rest of the stats that are out there kind of work into that. But ultimately, it comes down to your management of your team.
Yeah, there's some leagues that have 12-team leagues that have 8 to 9 bench spots. It's like, what's the whole point of managing? Like, just you get this massive team to draft, and there's nobody on waivers to ever pick up because it's all on somebody else's squad.
And that's cool if the entire league trades, right? Like that's cool. But if there's only 3 or 4 people in your league that trade, but
that works more for dynasty, where your dynasty is based off trading and managing an actual full on team for multiple seasons.
My point is at that point, why don't you just do dynasty? Yeah. If you're having 9 bench spots, just do dynasty. Why are you redrafting? Think about the how long it takes to draft that league.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You'd be sitting there all day.
Yeah.
And we keep a light bench.
Yeah, we 6 is perfect. 6 is plenty. It allows for a rotation. One IR spot too as well. I know people complain about being able to put certain people on IR spots and different stuff, but I mean, the way I manage my league is the way that Chris was explaining. Is it makes you have to sit there and
sleep.
You are not the commissioner. You did help put together the rules. You did. Oh, it's all our league here, but as a commissioner, the way I run the league is so that the rules dictate that there actually is a sportsman aspect to it where you really have to keep an eye on things and manage it. We've lost a lot of guys in our league over the years because they just don't have the time to play in it anymore. And I get it because you do have to kind of ball hawk, a little bit. So that being said, guys, Kane, Nick, thanks for joining us. Chris, as always,
thanks, guys.
Appreciate the episode. Those of you tuned in to watch, put that trophy away, please. Those of you tuned in to watch today, please leave a comment if you have any comments off the things we brought up. If we just talked about trends. If there's anything that you think is a big trend that you don't like or you do like, feel free to let us know. Tell us to shove it if you think the stuff we have to say is not real or stupid. But I think at the end of the day, give us the comments, give us the feedback. We'd love to bring them up at the next podcast, and we'd like to maybe even see if we can get some other listeners on here if we have a chance. So tune in if you like it, like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification button in the corner for all our next drops.
Where is it?
It's down below Nick. It's down below Nick.
There it is. It's down there.
Down there. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.